Senator Jessica Ramos is one of a number of Democrats who think the clock has run out on the Adams administration. So I need to ask you, it's a crowded Democratic field, Senator. How will you differentiate yourself from all the others who want the job?
Thanks for having me on your show, Marcia. You know, I'm obviously the only woman running for mayor this year, and that certainly differentiates me from everyone else in the field. But what really sets me apart is my record. I am not just a fighter for working families in New York. I've actually fought and won. I'm the senator who has raised the minimum wage, and by the way, it's gone up this month because now the minimum wage should go up every year. I am the state senator that has championed expanding child care affordability and so many other things. But it's been heartbreaking to see how much trust has been lost in our city hall because of its mismanagement and the corruption that's taking place.
I think I need to ask you this, though. I think one of the lessons of the presidential election has been that people want a mayor who will make the city more affordable so that they don't feel that they have to leave. How would you do that? Well,
I think there's a lot a mayor can do to make sure that our city is much easier to live in. And for starters, of course, there's the housing crisis that we've been in for a very long time, even before the pandemic.
There is the city of yes.
There is the city of yes.
80,000 new units.
Well, 80,000 units are not going to get us out of the pickle we're in. We actually project that over the next 10 years, we're going to need to build at least 600,000 affordable housing units, not to mention the regular market rate units.
How are you going to do it if you're mayor?
Well, bringing together the construction unions that do the actual work, the tenants who want to be able to afford to live in our city, and even the landlords who are going to be able to make this possible. The city of yes shouldn't be the end point for our housing agenda. We need to be able to actually support every single New Yorker in providing housing where possible. Obviously, the city plays a very important role in fomenting that and making sure that we are doing so creatively. But part of it's also property tax reform so that developers and landowners can feel like the city is actually incentivizing them to build that affordable housing in the pockets of the city where they're needed most.
So what kind of property reform do you think is necessary, property tax reform?
Well, right now the city isn't in compliance with the existing law, and it hasn't been for many years. So right now, someone who lives in Washington, in Jackson Heights like me, is paying $5,000 a year through our rent versus someone who owns a brownstone in Park Slope and only pays about $3,000 a year in property tax. That's not okay, and that actually hinders the development of housing.
People who have run for mayor, including former Mayor Bill de Blasio, who ran in 2013 and promised property tax reform and was never able to do it. So what makes you think if you were elected that you would be able to do it? It's sort of like the third rail that nobody wants to touch.
I know, and there's been several lawsuits to that effect, and I think we're actually going to see some advocacy at the state level in this coming legislative session. But here at home in the city, the mayor actually is able to direct the Department of Finance to conduct uniform property value assessments that have not been taking place.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of people screaming when their tax bills go up.
Well, it's actually most of us who are paying much more than we should.
So do you think that that's something that's actually doable, that you can actually get a tax reform package passed by the city council, given the fact that there's going to be a lot of people in the city council whose constituents are going to say, don't do it to me?
Well, I think this is about uniformity, and I know that a lot of council members are going to want to help me in order to deliver some tax relief for our neighbors. But ultimately, it really is about the Department of Finance empowering the agency to do what they need to do in order to comply with the law.
You know, crime is also a really big issue in terms of prosperity in the city. And while Mayor Adams can say that he's had some success in reducing some crimes, especially shootings, there's a lot of other crimes like assault on the subway that has been resistant to change. And especially lately, when we've seen a woman set on fire, another person pushed under the subway trains, I wonder, what would you do to try to stop that? Does it have to do with mental health programs?
It has a lot to do with mental health programs. It has a lot to do with upskilling our EMS and EMT workers in order to work with our police officers to truly address these situations. I mean, those tragedies have been heartbreaking. I say that as a woman myself, and especially as a mother to middle school children who are taking the subway by themselves.
You take the subway.
I do. I don't have a driver's license.
I know that. Do you change the way you get on the subway because of these crimes? Do you stand back from the edge of the track? Are you concerned about violence when you take the subway?
I mean, I think that, like any New Yorker, I'm always aware of my surroundings wherever I am. That's the way I, grew up in New York City back in the 80s. So we come from a time, I think, that was truly much more dangerous. But today, yeah, I absolutely, especially if it's late at night and I'm coming home from an event or I'm even waiting at a bus stop. But this is why what I want to see is people who are severely mentally ill very well taken care of, making sure that they are out of harm's way so that they don't harm any other New Yorkers or they don't harm themselves.
So what do we need? Do we need more clinics, more courts, more workers?
We need to undo the harm that former Governor Cuomo did in closing down our mental health facilities. A lot of those facilities.
About Mario Cuomo or Andrew Cuomo?
Andrew Cuomo. A lot of those facilities are still there and can be refurbished, reopened, restaffed so that there are the psychiatric beds that we need in order for people to get the mid to very long-term care that they might need, because it's not okay to leave people who are severely mentally ill out in the street. And then at the same time, we need to equip our hospitals so that everyone can access mental health care in the short term. But we need to be proactive in these measures, and it's going to take a lot of interagency effort on behalf of City Hall in order to achieve the wellness that we need.
But some of these programs are going to end up costing billions of dollars. Where will the money come from?
Well, the money comes from the taxes that we are already paying. Remember, the city can't levy its own taxes. We're going to have to ask Albany for some help. But at the same time, we do have money in the city that's being mismanaged and misappropriated. So we can figure out how to make sure that when we're talking about housing, we're also including supportive housing units that are needed for the mentally ill.
So I need to talk to you about two things, because you are also a state senator and you have to go back to Albany in the next few weeks. So here's the question. Both the mayor and the governor have tax proposals that would reduce taxes. The mayor wants to reduce taxes for the lowest rung people. He calls it axe the tax. And the governor wants to give middle-class people a tax rebate of between $300 and $500. Do either of these plans have any hope of passing in Albany, and would you vote for them?
I would be very supportive of plans to reduce taxes on the backbone of our economy, which is the working and middle class in New York City. But of course, tax breaks are not free. And for a long time, we've been giving tax breaks to the 1%, to the richest New Yorkers. And, we actually have more billionaires this year than we had just several months ago in New York State, who are largely going untaxed. I actually have an unrealized capital gains tax that I have been promoting in the state Senate for the past few years, which would help us generate $25 billion in its first year. And this is just taxing 139 people. Not you, not me, not our millionaires.
Aren't you afraid that they would leave?
I am not afraid that they would leave, because if they're New Yorkers, they like being in New York. And we know this. Who is leaving is the middle class. I see a lot of my peers finally, doing well in their careers. They finally have enough money to buy a house, but they can't afford to do that here in New York. They end up buying their house in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey. We don't want that. We want to keep our families in New York.
We're going to have to leave it right there for now. But up next, former Congressman Anthony Weiner considering re-entering public life. We're back with State Senator and candidate for Mayor Jessica Ramos. So I wanted to ask you, Mayor Adams seems to feel that he has a lane for running for re-election. He's carved out sort of a middle-of-the-road, moderate lane where most of the other candidates are running to the left of him. Is there a concern that a lot of the people on the left will cancel each other out?
Well, I'm hoping to really differentiate myself, not only with my record, but where I want to take the city. Because we, of course, are a city of immigrants, very hardworking people who came here to build generational wealth. So the city should really be a supportive pillar of our economy and our entrepreneurial spirit that characterizes New York in that way. So a lot of what you're going to hear me talk about over the next few weeks and months is about helping our small businesses, from the bodega owner all the way to our supermarkets, and really any New Yorker who is dreaming of opening their small business should be able to do so in New York.
Another sticky wicket for the legislature is going to be the MTA, which has proposed a $69 billion capital plan, which is in addition to congestion pricing. And it's a plan that was already been rejected by Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie and by your boss, or your leader rather, Senate Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousins. So what's going to happen? Well,
what's going to happen is that we're going to have to figure out money. And this goes back to the tax conversation that we just had.
So is it more taxes for the MTA?
We unfortunately have had to recover from decades of disinvestment in the MTA. And this is why I'm such a fighter for transparency, because oftentimes we feel like we give all this tax money to the MTA, and what is it that they're actually doing with it? There's delays in repairs. Our signal system is still from the 30s on many lines. We want to see real capital improvements, and if we're able to deliver that service to people, well, then we can encourage more New Yorkers to take public transit. But that should have happened on the front end, and now we're making up for all of these, all of this neglect that has taken place over the last 50 years.
Here's the question: if they need $69 billion, isn't there another tax hike that's going to be necessary? I mean, the whole state budget is like $217 billion. $69 billion is like a third of that. You can't possibly give it in state funds.
Well, the 69 would be over several years,
but still,
not just one, but it's still a very big challenge. And this is why I believe that if anybody should be taxed, is the people who are doing very, very well. I mean, the income inequality in our city and in our state is so palpable. And many times New Yorkers who think they're rich are actually within the spectrum not that rich compared to the billionaires who have been able to reap profits, like from our healthcare industry, and making, like many New Yorkers, rightfully upset, because it's not okay to profit off of our well-being or off of our illness when in fact we need the funding to make sure that all of these systems produce better outcomes for us.
So I think we want to let New Yorkers know, or people who watch the show, a little bit more about Jessica Ramos. So you said you don't have a driver's license.
I don't.
So would you ever consider getting one?
You know, I got my permit a few years ago. I've taken some practice lessons up in Albany when I'm a little less busy or feel less, running from one side to the other. Maybe eventually I will. I do think it's a life skill, but I don't want to have to worry about finding parking in New York City.
Not even with congestion pricing?
Absolutely not. I don't know how people do it, having to circle the block 7 times. I've heard from neighbors who, it takes half an hour to find a spot. Then you got to wake up extra early to move it because of alternate side parking. That's not something I want to do.
Late at night when you're coming back from a meeting, wouldn't it be nice to just get in the car and go home?
Well, yes, it would be nice. But it also would be nice if the MTA can do that for me reliably and effectively.
A good point. So I'm wondering, what qualities do you look for in a friend?
Wow, that's a great question. Honesty. I don't like yes people. Or people who just simply want to make me feel good for the sake of it.
You want to be challenged.
I want real conversation. I want real sincerity. And I also want someone who's going to make me laugh. Good humor and good companionship is really important in a friend.
So we are starting the new year. Have you made any resolutions? Or do you plan on making any resolutions?
Well, I have a big one. I'm hoping to be the next mayor of New York City. That's probably the biggest resolution I've had in my life. But I guess I would love to do a little more cooking. cooking. I love to cook.
What's your specialty?
Well, for Christmas, I made pernil for my family. I also made a tagine, which is a Moroccan dish that we enjoyed since it was my turn to host Christmas at home this year. Between me and my sisters, you know, we've been taking turns. So who knows?
So would you ever consider joining the Polar Bear Challenge on New Year's Day and plunging into the waters off Coney Island?
I've thought about that many times. Yeah, I've done cold plunges before, so why not?
Seriously?
I would.
I would never do that. So here's another question. Do you have any hidden talents that we don't know about?
Any hidden talents? Well, I do love to dance salsa.
You do?
I do. You know, salsa was invented here in New York City, so it's a very New York City rhythm.
I'm so tempted to ask you to demonstrate, but I'm not going to.
Only if you dance with me.
I have 2 left feet.
I don't believe that.
So is it better to ask for permission or forgiveness?
Oh, that's too relative to what we're talking about. Sometimes it's important to ask for permission when you want to be courteous, when you want to be respectful of the stakeholders involved. But sometimes when you want to do the right thing and you know people will be naysayers in order to protect their own interests, it's just important to do the right thing.
So you're a veteran of Albany, and you know how difficult it is to pass legislation. So if you could wave a magic wand and pass one piece of dream legislation without having to deal with all the back and forth, what would it be?
Oh, I would love to pass the New York Health Act. I would love for New Yorkers to be able to just go to a hospital and receive the quality health care that they deserve, no questions asked. We get taxed so much. We pay, as New Yorkers, we work and work and work. People have 3 jobs. They have a side hustle. It's too much. And we are just burning ourselves out with very little reward at the end. And I think that, you know, working hard should mean something again. That begins with our health.
So my question is this: is New York City a good place to raise kids? I mean, you're the mother of 2 boys. Is it a good place to raise your sons?
I love my city. I think the city is the best city in the world. I mean, I'm a public school graduate here in New York City, and I've decided to raise my children here. And I want everyone to feel that way. This is why I want to end all of those games that are played with the funding for our public schools. Making believe that we need cuts when we don't need cuts is not okay. All of our investments in our children should be sacred. And actually, the first pillar of the service economy that and care economy that I want to deliver for New York City has been childcare. I talk about childcare all the time, not just because I know how much it's needed as a mom, but because it's a workforce investment in the children themselves, in the childcare workers that are most often women. This could probably be the best investment we can make with our taxpayer dollars.
So last question. Play tour guide in your district. If you were giving somebody a tour of your district, what 3 places would you say are must-see places for them to go to?
Well, the Hall of Science comes to mind immediately, right at the heart of Flushing Meadows Corona Park. It's an incredible place where you can play mini golf, you can see all sorts of scientific experiments, and it's very hands-on, especially for children. I was also very fortunate to help a partnership between the city and them open a universal pre-K right outside from my days at City Hall prior to being a state senator. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble, you know, in picking a restaurant or 2, but all of the food in my district, I mean, that's what we're known for in my corner of Queens. Because we're the most diverse place in the country, we speak 200 languages where I come from. You know, you can just pick a country and I can suggest a great restaurant that's going to deliver on top-notch cuisine. And I would say that a 3rd place, well, you gotta catch a Mets game. You know, I mean, I'm a big Mets fan, really excited about Soto joining, you know, the squad. And we're hoping that as opening day draws near, you know, Mets fans will be right there to cheer our home team on.
Senator Jessica Ramos, hoping to break the glass ceiling, become the first mayor of the city to be a woman. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you at home for joining us as well.